no land, no mana, and there's no mana at all. It's not even like other sources. The plan is to just play cards that don't cost mana. Most of the time, you're not even playing cards. You kind of just want to start discarding to hand size at the beginning of the game. Mm-hmm. That's why you choose to draw. You want to discard to hand size and hopefully discard a dredger like Stinkweed Imp or Golgari Grave Troll, so that you can start finding things like Icarids or Narcomoebas or Nether Shadows, which would let you eventually set up a Dread Return. One of the big things that you Dread Return is Balustrad's Spy, because if you can get that guy into play, you'll mill your whole deck, and then you can Dread Return yourself in and set up a combo kill with Flare of the Hatebound.
All right, so the action starts off as predicted. Joe Lossett with a turn 1 Scalding Tarn, and Jeremy just discarding Golgari Grave Troll. Manaless Dredge, one of the more bizarre features of Legacy, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an oddball. One of its big strengths, though, is that it's not really vulnerable to a lot of interaction, because it doesn't really play that many cards. Like, it doesn't cast a lot of spells, and it doesn't actually have any land, and it doesn't, it doesn't really do a lot, although sometimes it just puts lots of creatures into play, which can be very, very deadly.
So you see there, Jeremy judging Golgari Grave Troll, flipping over another Shadow, a Dread Return, and a couple Golgari Thug, and a couple non-dredgers, and then
a Mishra's Bauble, Street Wraith, Gataxian Probe.
All those cards are
all
just
the platinum hits.
They're just supposed to be juice for Jeremy, if he draws them in their opening hand, to really go off by playing these free cantrips that then replace themselves with dredges.
Right, because like once you've discarded one dredger, hopefully you keep finding more dredgers the more you dredge.
And there is a Narcomoeba that he returns and a Phantasmagoria, which is really the critical piece of this deck.
Phantasmagoria letting him discard more of his cards in order to get back a card that he has no intention of ever playing.
Mm-hmm. There is Nether Shadow. For those of you who want to know some of the differences between Standard and Legacy, in Standard format Magic, you're allowed to rearrange your graveyard however. You want to look through it, resort it, whatever, that's fine. In Legacy, you're not allowed to do this because there are cards that do care about the order of your graveyard. Nether Shadow among those cards.
Yeah, Phantasmagorian's special ability is that instead of having to wait to discard to hand size over the next 3 turns, you get to just discard right now. It's like you get you get almost half of the effectiveness of one with nothing, but you don't actually have to pay the mana.
There is an old Nether Shadow, and it's all of its glory, old template right there.
If Shadow is in graveyard.
The text box is so long that they have to cut the word "the" out of it multiple times.
If Shadow is in graveyard.
All right. Here is a Vendilion Click from Joe Lossett.
Vendilion Click with the special ability of not making them discard the card.
But Joe is targeting himself, getting rid of Counterbalance, which makes sense as Jeremy has very little interest in resolving spells. And Jeremy simply attacks with the Nether Shadow, gets the Narcomoeba back off of the dredge, discards Grave Troll, and is ready to go again.
This is just good, clean, honest Magic right here.
This is the way that Richard Garfield intended it, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Nether Shadows are coming back here.
So that's good. Jeremy hasn't cast the spells too much. Mostly just continuing to kind of flip over his deck the slow way. He actually has a shocking number of creatures that can come back without actually having to be cast, like Icarid, Narcomoeba, Nether Shadow, and he actually can get ahead with things like Bridge from Below because of Cabal Therapy, a rare spell actually being cast, albeit for 0 mana, but he can actually make multiple creatures by sacking a creature when there are multiple bridges in their graveyard.
So it looks like Jeremy is moving to get his Phantasmagoria back. This, of course, is just something to allow him to discard cards. Bridge from Below among the cards that were discarded. And if you want to know why people play decks like Manaless Dredge, you're getting a pretty good demonstration. Game 1, most decks lack any meaningful tools to interact with you.
Right. I mean, combo decks can often race, but if you're not playing like a combo kill that can win on the first few turns, the thing about Manaless Dredge is that it's not the fastest deck in the format, but it is one of the most unstoppable. If you don't actually have straight up graveyard hate, your only real hope is to race. I mean, it's not really playing any cards, so you can't stop the cards it plays.
Mm-hmm. So it appears that we are seeing 3 copies of Nether Shadow Sacrifice to a Dread Return with Bridge from Below in the graveyard. See momentarily if these bridge triggers have been remembered.
Yeah, the nice thing about Dread Return is that it gets to kill 3 of your creatures. Mm-hmm. You can't counter that part.
All right, so here it comes. Here comes the Balustrade Spy.
Joe Lossett with a Force of Will, hoping to possibly stick Jeremy without a, trying to stop him from winning this turn. The problem, of course, being that Jeremy has access to a ton of Cabal therapies and Dread Returns, so there's no way this is actually stopping him.
So what happens if Joe has another Vendilion click here if Jeremy runs out of a deck?
He puts the card on the bottom first.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Deck size remains the same.
Yep.
So yeah, the Spy is in here, as you were saying, just to flip over the entire deck.
Yeah, this deck, it's got cards that let you discard your cards, it's got cards that kill your own creatures, and it's got cards that run yourself out of cards.
Really common synergies one regularly sees in tournament level Magic.
Right, like, it's also got Kazcprza Probe to make sure that you can pay some life. And mostly it just has Greater Moss Dog.
Yeah.
Greater
a lot of them.
The legacy staple.
The nice thing about Manaless Dredge is it's eminently affordable, unlike many legacy decks, because it is basically a Ravnica draft deck with a couple Balustrade Spies thrown in.
Yes, the Ravnica draft deck.
There's a fresh Vendilion click played by Joe. So this is an attempt from Joe to remove this is an attempt for Joe to remove the Bridge from Belows from Jeremy's graveyard, because bridges get removed when an opposing creature dies. So
Absolutely, and this is why Jeremy should have led with Cabal Therapy instead of just going straight to the bridges. I mean, straight to the Dread Returns. If Joe actually pulls this off, this would be an unbelievable upset.
So we'll see here momentarily, Joe appears to be having a discussion with the spotter at the table exactly what the timing is of all of this. But this is the issue, with a lot of legacy decks. They don't have ways to kill, often do not have good ways of killing their own creatures. Much of the removal they play is Swords to Plowshares. That doesn't offer any assistance against Bridge from Below.
Vendilion Click with the special ability of being able to kill itself when a second one is played.
Just intuitive magic. The way that Richard drew it up. So there's a Vendilion Click. Looking at a hand of uncastable creatures and a Mishra's Bauble. Now these bridges are getting removed. And there they go.
So this means that, I mean, Jeremy can only Dread Return one more time, right?
Potentially with the Icarids, he could try to re-navigate it. But he's going to run out of the deck.
Yeah, he's not going to have any cards in his deck.
So there's a Flare. Joe, in response, cracks a fetch land. Trying to take in the whole picture here.
Is this a Swords to Plowshares? It is. By Swords to Plowsharing, the Flare of the Hate the Flare of the Hatebound, Jeremy will be unable to sacrifice it to Dread Return, triggering its ability again. Joe has actually pulled this one off.
Yep.
This is unbelievable.
And he still has a Force of Will left over.
Absolutely.
He hasn't even had to touch his Force of Will.
Absolutely. I think Jeremy just thought this one was in the bag, you know?
Yep.
Incredible. Joe Lossett is a monster.
And that's game.
I guess Jeremy runs out of cards in his deck. Probably should have thought about that before targeting himself with the Spy.
Yeah, if Jeremy just plays manual style the whole way and just is flipping over his Grave Trolls and just getting Nether Shadow and Ichorids back, I think it's really hard for Joe to win that game. He's not equipped to fight that sort of battle.
Oh, and I think actually I think if he just led with a series of Cabal therapies without ever exposing his Flare, there's no reason he should have cast Dread Return until after he had stripped Joe Lossett of, took a look first at what Joe's working with. I mean, that could have been a very, very different game.
Absolutely.
But you're absolutely right. I think there's no reason to not go slow there. Like, what's the hurry? He can't lock you out.
Yeah, it's not even clear Joe can beat just the Nether Shadows and Ichorids over a long game.
Exactly.
It's really challenging for him to beat that kind of stuff.
Right. I got a feeling it's one of those spots where Jeremy's just so used to people not being able to beat the combo, you just show it to them and they're dead, you know? Joe Lossett, a Legacy veteran, this is not his first time at the Manaless Dredge Rodeo.
So moving on to the sideboard now, Joe Lossett with a Pithy Needle, a Venser, 2 Wear Tears, 2 Supreme Verdicts, a Sulfur Elemental, a Spell Snare, 2 Flusterstorms, a Elemental Blast, a Pyroblast, a Relic Progenitus, and 2 Rest in Peace. Those last 3 cards being the most critical, giving him really effective Graveyard Disruption. Manaless Dredge is not that effective at playing against Graveyard Disruption, especially Rest in Peace. I also think you may see the Flusterstorms come in. Cheap Permission is fairly good at fighting the Cabal Therapies and Dread Return type of setup that Jeremy's trying to get going here. And again, he has access to no mana. So even a Flusterstorm just by itself will counter any spell that Jeremy tries to go to.
Absolutely. On the other side of it, Jeremy has... so he's got 4 Mindbreak Traps, 4 Surgical Extractions, a Sickening Shoal, a Noxious Revival, a Serra Avatar, and 4 Ashen Riders.
Okay.
After that game, do you think that the 1 Noxious Revival is a thing? Or is that just too fancy?
I think it could be a thing. I would assume the Noxious Revival is more for an anti-Deathrite Shaman measure. Though I am no expert on how this deck sideboards certain things. Since it's all predicated on working through the graveyard, I don't even know how Ashen Rider is even particularly helpful, because presumably you need that to blow up some sort of Rest in Peace type of card.
Well, you can't. You'll never be able to.
Exactly. So the Ashen Riders, I guess, are for non-graveyard hate permanents that are troubling for you to get through.
Right.
Ensnaring Bridge or something like that.
And then Serra Avatar. Serra Avatar, another way to... I think that's probably the plan if you just are really concerned about running out of cards.
Yes.
Dude, this deck is weird.
It's not Duck.
Dude, Legacy people they're awesome. They're like, first of all, very clearly from a different reality. Because like the reality that, I know the reality I'm from. First of all, we don't, when we fill out our deck lists, under the land section, write lols.
Yes, as Jeremy did on his deck registration sheet. Jeremy electing to draw. Again, this is another weird feature of the Manaless Dredge deck. All it wants to do is discard a hand size the first turn. And so, not in the market to be on the play.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Lossett's deck is not exactly like the most intuitive Magic. I mean, he's playing a bunch of miracles that he can just summon at will. He's got counter spells that don't cost any mana. He's got, Jace the Mind Sculptor isn't even like a realistic card, but this is nothing compared to a deck that chooses to draw. All it ever does is discard. It puts cards in his deck that give it the special ability to discard more cards. It has cards that let it pay life to do nothing. Cards that let it kill its own creatures. Everything I know is wrong. Like, everything is just weird and backwards. I wonder if Garfield's ever played against Manaless Dredge. I feel like he should have to sometime, you know?
I do know that our dear friend Matt Place once told me a story of Richard Garfield gunslinging, where his opponent put him into Strip Mine Crucible of Worlds Lock. And so,
oh, wow.
How can you do that to Richard?
Right.
How can you do that to Richard?
Is nothing sacred?
Yeah. Why do you want to rub his nose in that, you know? The man made magic. He created it. This is your one time to be in his presence and ask him any question that you want to know. It's like being with a genie. He essentially gets to grant you a magic wish, and instead you choose to Crucible Strip Mine him.
The first time I ever played a game against Richard Garfield, I played a fast bond on the first turn, which I followed up with Time Twister before eventually dropping a number of black vices on him.
Well, at least all of those cards were in Alpha, the set he made.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all, at that point, it's just, that to me feels like fair game.
Well, he was playing with Reef Pirates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was trying to show off the new Magic set.
This is Homelands?
Yeah. So he's just playing with Memory Lapse and Reef Pirates and Serrated Arrows.
I remember a Reef Pirate.
Yeah, he was just gunslinging at the local hobby shop, Campus Collectibles in Ann Arbor. Yeah, he's just going hard. And it was great. I mean, at one point, he actually successfully memory lapsed my Brain Geyser.
That's a big game.
Yeah, but then I time walked and just drew it again. Yeah.
Homelands is an especially brutal set to be gunslinging with, you know?
Oh my God, it was great. Garfield's a good sport though. I mean, he's just out there with giant albatross, keeping a straight face. He just has a giant albatross in play, and it's like, and I know it had to hurt him, like to read the sheer number of lines of text on giant albatross, whereas my cards are all just like.
Simple resident designs like take another turn.
A player draws
draw
3 cards.
Yeah.
Well, I made him draw 3 cards.
Oh, that's very
You
generous.
got to remember,
of
he had a black vice or 2 on him.
Well, you risk him finding more Reef Pirates is the thing.
Yeah, well, that's why I waited until it was too late. Yeah,
So-
the first number of games I played with him, a lot of it, I think he questioned some of the things going on, like City of Brass, Mirror Universe,
Yep.
and Nether Void at all. Like, we were just doing things that just, I don't think he was 100% on board with, but...
So Joe on a mulligan, he's looking at mulligan again. Against decks like Dredge, you will often see people mulligan very aggressively for their hate cards because they are unlikely to win without them and very likely to win with them. So you throw away a lot of reasonable looking hands because you got to find your rest in peace. You got to find your relic.
Or you could just play control. Like, if you can assemble the combination of 2 Vendilion clicks.
Yeah.
We see a lot of games where it's like, first of all, people are just not playing any mana. And then it looks like the people that are not playing mana can't possibly lose. And then they end up, somehow weird things like this happen. Like did you see the Elf game where Jerry Thompson was playing Hypergenesis versus Elf combo?
I have not.
Oh my God. You should look up the tapes from it. Both players just keep their hand. Both players do nothing on the first turn. And then both players start discarding. Neither one has any mana. And they just both hang out for like 5 turns, discarding to hand size. Eventually, Jerry goes off and dies immediately.
Classic Magic. Joe looking at 5.
I like that Legacy has a range. There's a lot of different types of things people do in Legacy.
Yeah, that is the sweet part about the format. In its ideal state, it's people doing all sorts of weird stuff. So you see
Jeremy successfully discards a card that lets him discard 3 more. It's like he just got card advantage.
Well, actually, it lets him discard 6 more because you can trigger it, you can use it, and then in response use it again. So it could be his whole hand if it was.
Oh my God, he can just 1 with nothing with the buyback?
Yeah, he can
Unbelievable.
He can essentially go off next turn. Joe here with a brainstorm on his main phase.
That's the problem. 1 with nothing was a little too good. It's like Black Lotus was too good, so they toned it down to Lion's Eye Diamond. And then they were like, Lion's Eye Diamond was too good, so they're like, okay, we have to take the Black Lotus half of it off entirely, just go with 1 with nothing. And 1 with nothing was too good, so they had to make Phantasmagorian. Although I guess this one's actually better.
Joe resets. Still has not found a relic or a rest in peace. And here we go. So he discards. Now I assume we'll see some dredging, which we do. Grave Troll going back to the hand.
This is Jeremy on his upkeep discarded 3 cards in order to have 1 card that he won't play, so that during his draw phase, instead of drawing a card, he could draw a card he won't play. He manages to successfully flip over a card that he won't play that will allow him to put it back into his deck so that later he can flip it over and not play it.
He has, however, found a 1/1 flyer for free. So he is starting to get paid off for these synergies.
Yeah. Well, to call it free is generous, I think.
Well, just like everything else in life, you pay costs in other ways.
Yes.
It's never truly free.
Yeah, there's no such thing as free parking and no such thing as free narcomoebas.
All right, so Golgari Grave Troll back in the hand. And now we're going to see a Gitaxian Probe here.
I know this has got to warm your heart. You've long been an advocate of Gitaxian Probe for fun and profit.
Yeah, well, in a dredge deck, it's definitely warming my charcoal heart, for sure. I like it in Delver and Snapcaster decks, but it's quite good here as well, potentially, with these kind of openings.
Joe has successfully found 1/2 of his combo.
A Vendilion Click.
Yes. If he can successfully find the other half of it, it will allow him to kill his own creature.
All right, so a Dread Return is now in the graveyard. So that is step 1 for Jeremy. But remember, Joe has a couple landmines hanging out in his deck. If he finds a copy of Rest in Peace, this game could be over before it even really starts.
Yeah, Joe's answers to Rest in Peace. Yeah. Not a lot of them.
So another discard to a freshly revealed Phantasmagorium, putting 2 Golgari Grave Trolls in the graveyard, the ones that we saw earlier. And that's going to do it for Jeremy. Pretty powerful turn in terms of setup.
Yeah, he managed to get a 1/1 flyer into play.
Well, it's not about what's in play necessarily. More about what's coming. So Joe, I'm assuming, is going to be very aggressive using his shuffling effects and Sensei's Divine Top, searching for a Rest in Peace. Finds a Venser, a land, and Swords to Plowshares.
The Swords to Plowshares do enough for him.
Probably not. It is a potentially helpful tool as we saw in Game 1, but it by itself is not going to stop what Jeremy's up to.
It aspires to buy him 1 more turn to try to find Rest in Peace, or even Relic of Progenitus. Relic of Progenitus, far from game over, but at least it's like about 5 extra turns.
I don't know if you've seen these manaless dredge decks in action, but when it gets down to 3 cards in hand and the graveyard gets nuked, it is ugly. They play draw go in air quotes for about 5 turns before maybe being able to reassemble something. So Joe's going to sack a fetch land here. He'll get a land and, more importantly, shuffle his deck to give him 3 fresh looks at Rest in Peace or Relic of Progenitus. Searching through his deck here, finds a Volcanic Island. Joe doing what he can. I mean, he mulliganed very aggressively this game as well. You're going to see Joe spin the top. Force of Will, Pyroblast, Mystery card. Another Divining Top, so no help.
How do you feel about Red Elemental Blast? I mean, I guess it's one of those things where the competition isn't very steep.
Yep.
Because like Red Elemental Blast, it's the only spell it can counter is Gitaxian Probe, and the only creature it can kill is Narcomoeba.
When times are tough. So here comes a cycled Street Wraith here. That's going to flip over. That's going to rather dredge a Golgari Grave Troll.
Oh, no, the Red Elemental Blast can kill his own Vendilion Click.
Oh. Critical synergies, yeah. Some of that.
Yeah. Jeremy, getting to participate in the Legacy experience despite not having any fetch lands in his deck.
The Legacy experience, for those of you who may not know all the slang, is The act of picking up and shuffling your deck. Although that was not quite the Legacy experience, because he didn't search his deck for anything. He simply shuffled his
Put something back in. He did it in reverse.
All right, so upkeep, getting back some Icarids.
Teams for your event will be going off shortly.
So this is good.
Banner at the side of the room.
Jeremy's deck has lots of keywords. Flying, haste.
Another bridge, another Dread Return, and another Icarid revealed amongst that dredge.
Once again, two-headed giant. Event is about
Playing against a manaless dredge deck kind of reminds me of what it kind of makes me think of what it must be like to be in the zombie apocalypse. Like it's mostly hopeless, and there's just like this undead swarm closing in on you, and you see them coming from a long way away, but they're kind of just drooling and moving towards you very, very slowly, but inevitably.
Yes.
And then they just kind of overpower you, and nothing you do really matters, and nothing they're doing makes any sense.
And they don't experience fatigue, so you can't
Correct.
have to outrun them because they'll eventually get to you.
Correct.
You have to sleep, and they do not.
Right.
So Source of Plowshares from Joe on the upkeep, taking care of the Icarid.
And like all good zombie apocalypses, it ends with somebody saying, "Rest in peace."
Or Relic of Progenitus. Or Leyline of the Void.
Jeremy increasing his lead as he now leads 19 life points to 17. One of the best indicators of who's winning.
So here comes a Cabal Therapy. This will trigger the Bridge from Below's, get some zombies.
As is often the case in Magic, you kill one of your creatures and two pop up.
Ooh, and he sniped him. Got that Vendilion click. Learned his lesson from last time.
Good read.
And Joe had actually set up Pyroblast on his own Vendilion click. That was going to happen potentially next turn. Joe almost got his own combo off.
Yep.
Draws and spins top again.
Ashley Jordan. The author is Ashley Jordan. Will be leaving at 2 o'clock
Is that a white card?
I believe Joe has found Terminus.
before she heads off for the day.
I mean, Terminus is a thing. That'll play.
Yep.
The day at 2 o'clock.
And Joe adds a second Divining Top. So Jeremy going to discard, get a Phantasmagorium back. He is then getting back an Icarid, removing a Thug, and we see a Grave Troll Dredge here. All the hits, Stinkweed Imp, Shambling Shell, Greater Moss Dog, Balustrade Spy, along an Icarid and another Shadow.
So now, Jeremy is putting his cards into the graveyard in the order that he flips them off the top of his deck. But I believe with Dredge, you can actually look at all 6 at the same time and put them in the graveyard in the order you want, because all 6 are considered to be going to the graveyard at the same time. You can't rearrange them once they go to the graveyard, but when you flip stacks,
I'm not positive if that's the case. I don't know the specifics of the Dredge rule.
yeah, I know back in the early 70s when I used to dredge, that's how we used to do it, but they might, you can never tell. It's possible that the world has come to its senses since then.
Maybe that was the rule initially, but they cleaned that up once Dredge in Eternal formats was a thing. So before the Icarid trigger here, Joe gonna spin top, potentially looking to miracle his Terminus this turn to get rid of the Icarid forever, or maybe willing to let Jeremy build up more of a board. Appears he is not looking to Terminus this turn. And there you go. So Icarid dies at the end of the turn. That's going to trigger the Bridge from Below's again.
Icarid, one of the many of the creatures in this deck that have the special ability of can kill itself.
Yes. A key synergy. Another spin of the Divining Top that looks at Terminus and a fetch land and a red elemental blast. The fetch land being critical here as, again, Joe gets another shuffle to try to find some sort of long-term solution to what's going on.
Joe trying to sculpt the game in such a way so as to give himself the most number of turns possible before he expires. He's got to get not even just turns, looks at rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. So every shuffle effect is super important at this point.
And one of the tough things is that he can't afford to rest in peace and leave Jeremy with a dominating board position.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's no longer, obviously Terminus buys him all the time, but he has to actually also not die. He's at 10 life.
And then part of the recipe here is, finding fetch lands to allow him multiple shuffles. Then even it's not even about going to 0, going to 2 and going to 1 is also critical.
Yep.
Because he'll become locked out of using his fetch lands. So here come the Icarids on upkeep. Now, a Dredge of the Grave Troll. There's 2 Narcomoebas. This is actually pretty good timing if you're Joe, if you were working under the impression you were going to have to Terminus this turn anyway. All right, Joe spins his top. The die is cast. He has to Terminus this turn, and he does. So not only is that going to wipe Jeremy's board, more importantly, it's going to put everything on the bottom. So those Icarids are actually dealt with now.
That's a start.
No, that's really important. Another spin at the top from Joe. Looks at the Divining Top he had before, the Red Elemental Blast, and the fetch line we know about. Joe again gets a spin top, hoping that the third card provides something for him. It does not, so Joe's going to break his fetch land and spin one more time. At least. Joe looks again. Force of Will. Fetch land. Brainstorm. So Joe gonna set this back. You have to imagine he's interested in both Brainstorm and the fetch land to give him the maximum number of looks. Joe passes back. Upkeep. Nether Shadow comes back. Grave Troll Dredge. More bridges. Nether Shadow sacrifice 2 Cabal Therapy. Bridges trigger here from the sacrificed Nether Shadow. Although Joe may be arguing that he has missed his opportunity to do so. As in theory, you would have to put the bridge trigger on the sack before the Cabal Therapy resolves.
Yep.
So we'll see how this gets resolved momentarily. Again, Joe discussing with the spotter on the floor. All right, and it looks like those tokens are staying. So now we have a dread return. So Joe has Force of Will at the ready here. He can set this up with the Divining Top. There it is. So Joe has fended off the dread return. Pass the turn back to Joe. Joe untaps, replays his Divining Top, spins. Two lands, one of them a shuffle land, and a brainstorm. Now brainstorms. Looks at the same three. Replays top.
But he's got one brainstorm out of the way, I guess. Which is one less mana that he have to spend next turn.
Yep. All right. Another Shadow's coming back. Here's a dredge. So our Avatar going back. You can see Jeremy's deck getting pretty low right now. And again, a lot of Icarids and Narcomoebas left in that deck as they were set to the bottom by that Terminus a few turns back.
What's Joe looking to do here besides just find his key graveyard hate cards? I mean, how is he going to break up the combo? Does he have a way to sneak a win like last game?
I think in the face of that Sarah Avatar, it's going to be really hard. He can't just run Jeremy out, defend himself long enough where Jeremy runs out of a deck. That's not an option anymore. So I think he's going to actually have to shut out Jeremy's deck entirely in the spot. Two lands in a Flusterstorm. Joe draws. He's going to take the fetch land. He'll top again.
It's like he's playing a little lottery every turn.
Yep.
Just keeps trying to give himself chances to find one of his hate cards.
So Joe finds a land, shuffles again, trying to get more looks at Rest in Peace or Relic of Progenitus. Although now he's also worried, he also might just lose to the board at this point, even if he finds it.
Yeah, I mean, at 4 life, he doesn't have he did find it.
But he has found Rest in Peace, but he has not found something to beat the board.
Right. Well, so now the good news is he has one more turn. He's going to drop to 1. So this Nether Shadow and this zombie token, this is it.
Yep. All right, there goes Jeremy's graveyard.
Rest in peace, bro. And along with it, Jeremy's hopes of ever playing another card. It is just these two.
Just this 2-2 and this 1-1.
Gets in there, Joe's at 1. Plays the top. He gets one fresh look. Now he has to find something to beat the board.
Is it a Terminus?
He packs it in.
No help.
See, that's, people talk about Manaless Dredge can't be Rest in Peace. We just saw it. You just now witnessed a Manaless Dredge smashing Rest in Peace.
That is technically true.
It is.
In the most technical of senses, that is correct.
It's technically correct, and honestly, that's the best kind of correct.
Yes. So going to game 3 here. Joe will presumably be on the draw, as it's basically a free card against Manaless Dredge.
Yeah, but it's not even clear you want extra cards. These people are working so hard to destroy their own resources.
No, you can't get trapped into thinking their way. You know what I mean? You have to say, You had to ignore that. I know it looks attractive, but you had to just ignore that. Joe got so many looks at Rest in Peace that game,
Yeah, and he eventually found it.
but just a tad bit late.
That's the problem with the zombie apocalypse. Sometimes you wipe out the zombie hordes, and then you die of injuries sustained from the zombie bite.
Yeah. Not even that, it's like throwing out your shoulder from the shotgun blast. It's like that kills you.
Death by your shoulder being thrown out?
Yeah, something like that. That's a thing.
That's
a thing. Come on.
That's a tough way to go.
It is a tough way to go. Joe here in the tank, trying to think if there's any way for him to reconfigure his deck. Again, we saw the Red Elemental Blast and the Pyro Blast pretty narrow overall in this matchup, so Joe's already going fairly deep, trying to come up with any forms of relevant interactions besides his obvious graveyard hate cards.
Yeah, I think he needs to switch back to his Game 1 strategy. Game 2, he was on the Rest in Peace plan, but Jeremy just powers right through that. He's playing Manaless Dredge. Game 1, Joe went with the beat down milled strategy. He played a creature and then beat down his own creature, and Jeremy ran out of cards in his deck. Do you think the Sarah Avatar actually helped there? I mean, I know it was an insurance thing, but I kind of wonder, is it one of those things where, like, how much are you losing each time you don't have one more card deep?
It felt relevant to me that game, as it appeared that Joe did potentially have a game plan of just run him out of a deck by defending myself long enough. And the Sarah Avatar is very good in that world. All right, Jeremy is going to take a mulligan here, which is doubly
devastating.
It's so bad. So he's on the play taking a mulligan, which means that he has to say go, draw and say go again, then draw and discard before anything can get going.
It is unbelievable. The Manaless Dredge deck has, like, mulligans one time out of 4,000.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have any land. Oh, you had a no-lander?
Yep.
You want to throw that one back? You had a no-lander?
This means that Joe could conceivably get Rest in Peace in play before Jeremy has taken a game action.
That's true.
And he has Rest in Peace in hand. So we've had some laughs, but I think this one's...
It's been real.
We've had a good time. You know, So, I'm not entirely sure how Manaless Dredge gets out of the spot. I do not believe it is possible.
So let's start with the cards you can cast. Mishra's Bauble,
Yep.
Gitaxian Probe.
Yep.
So those are the cards you can cast.
All right. Yep.
All right.
Ding, 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 ding. Ring the bell. Joe Lossett, 2-1. Beats Jeremy Kazcprza playing Manaless Dredge. Wow.
Well,
Compelling and rich.
a variety of play experiences. That's one of the good things. That's how you know that this is a good mechanic. There's diversity in play patterns and game experiences.
A lot of variance.